March 14, 2019. Jacksonville, Florida. When emergency responders entered apartment 34B on Riverside Avenue, they found Michelle Carver huddled in the corner of her bedroom, eyes wide and unblinking, whispering the same phrase over and over, "She won't stop looking at me." The apartment was in ruins. Furniture overturned. Glass shattered across every surface. And in the center of the living room, positioned carefully on an undisturbed wooden chair, sat a porcelain doll in a Victorian dress. Its painted eyes were fixed on the bedroom door. Michelle had called 911 17 times in 3 hours, each call more frantic than the last. When paramedics finally convinced her to leave, she refused to take her eyes off the doll. She kept saying it had moved. That it had been in the closet when she went to sleep. Then on the dresser. Then by her bed. And now here, watching. Waiting. Michelle Carver was admitted to psychiatric care that night. The doll was donated to a thrift store on Phillips Highway. 3 weeks later, it would claim its next victim. Tonight, we examine 7 cursed dolls, each one leaving a trail of madness and ruin in its wake. The doll from Michelle Carver's apartment had no maker's mark. No tag. Nothing to indicate where it came from or who had crafted those too realistic glass eyes. The thrift store employee who accepted it, a woman named Sandra Yates, remembers the donation clearly. The man who brought it in wore gloves. He wouldn't touch it directly. He set it on the counter, took his tax receipt, and left without a word. Sandra placed it in the display window that same afternoon. By closing time, it had sold. A young couple, the Hendersons, bought it for their daughter's 5th birthday. They never made it home. Their car veered off Butler Boulevard at 9:47 p.m., striking a concrete barrier at 70 miles per hour. The husband survived. Barely. He told investigators that his wife started screaming in the passenger seat, clawing at something invisible on her lap. He looked over for just a second. The doll was moving, he said. Its head was turning. When police recovered the vehicle, the doll was found in the back seat, still pristine, still perfect. Its porcelain face bore no cracks despite the violence of the impact. The husband refused to be in the same room with it. The doll was placed in evidence storage, where it remained for 8 months. During that time, 3 separate officers reported feeling watched while working night shifts in the evidence room. One quit the force entirely, claiming she heard a child's laughter echoing through the aisles at 3 a.m. The doll's current location is unknown. Evidence logs show it was checked out for a case review in December 2019. It was never checked back in. Before Annabelle became famous, there was another. The museums don't talk about her. The occult investigators who locked Annabelle away in consecrated glass knew about this first doll, the one that came before. Her name, according to documents found in the basement of a Connecticut estate sale in 2003, was Mary Ann. She was a Raggedy Ann doll, identical to Annabelle in every way except one: her left eye was stitched with red thread instead of black. The documents detailed her history across 73 years and 9 owners. Every single one met an untimely death. The first owner, a girl named Dorothy Crane, fell down a well in 1931. The second, an elderly collector, died in a house fire that investigators ruled as arson, though no suspect was ever found. The doll was recovered from the ashes, completely untouched by the flames. By the 1980s, Mary Ann had passed through 5 more hands. Each owner reported the same phenomena: the doll would appear in rooms where it hadn't been left. Small objects would go missing, only to be found arranged in circles around the doll. And at night, in that space between sleep and waking, owners would feel the distinct sensation of small fingers touching their faces. The final documented owner, a man named Robert Kelsch, kept a journal. His entries from the last week of his life make for disturbing reading. It watches me when I sleep. I can feel it. I've locked it in the basement, but I still hear it moving upstairs. His final entry, dated November 3, 1987, "It's in the room with me now. I didn't let it in. The door is still locked." Robert Kelsch was found 3 days later, dead of an apparent heart attack. He was 31 years old with no history of heart disease. The doll was sitting on his chest. The estate sale documents end there. The family who purchased the paperwork never found Mary Ann herself. But 6 months after they bought those records, their house was broken into. Nothing was stolen. Except the documents. Someone wanted that history erased. In Victorian times, it was common practice to commission dolls in the likeness of children who had died. Memorial dolls, they were called. A way to preserve the memory of a lost child. But some believe these dolls carried something else. Something that shouldn't be preserved. In 2011, an antiques dealer in New Orleans acquired one such doll from a deceased estate. The doll wore a black mourning dress and held a single wilted flower. Its face had been crafted from a death mask, giving it an unsettling realism. The dealer, Marcus Thibault, listed it online for $1,200. It sold within hours. The buyer, a collector from Baton Rouge named Diane Russo, picked it up in person. Marcus remembers she seemed nervous as soon as she saw it. She asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while it was in his possession. He lied and said no. The truth was that his shop's security cameras had captured something on 3 separate nights. The doll's arm moving. Slowly. Deliberately. Reaching toward the edge of the shelf as if trying to climb down. Diane took the doll home anyway. She called him 2 days later, frantic, begging him to take it back. He refused. She stopped answering her phone after that. When concerned friends finally convinced police to perform a wellness check 3 weeks later, they found Diane's home in perfect order. No signs of struggle. No signs of forced entry. Except Diane was gone. Her car was in the driveway. Her purse on the counter. Her phone charging by the bed. And the funeral doll sat in her living room, positioned in front of the television, as if it had been watching and waiting. Diane Russo has never been found. The doll was placed in storage by her family. That storage unit caught fire 6 months later. The entire facility burned to the ground. When investigators sifted through the wreckage of Diane's unit, they found something impossible. The doll, completely intact, sitting upright in the ashes. It was still holding that wilted flower. And according to the fire marshal's report, the flower was fresh. Robert is the most famous cursed doll in America, and with good reason. Created in 1906 and given to Robert Eugene Otto as a childhood gift, this Buttonite figure dressed in a sailor suit has been blamed for accidents, broken bones, job losses, and even deaths. He currently resides in the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, behind glass. But the glass hasn't stopped him. Museum staff report that visitors who mock Robert or photograph him without permission often send letters of apology weeks later, begging him to lift his curse. They write about car accidents that happened the day after their visit. Mysterious illnesses that doctors can't explain. Runs of bad luck so consistent and severe they can't be coincidence. One letter, received in 2016, detailed a family's experience. After their teenage son took a photo of Robert while making faces at the doll, their lives fell apart. The father lost his job of 15 years. The mother developed a sudden, aggressive cancer. The son, the one who mocked Robert, fell from his bicycle and shattered his leg in 3 places. The bone never healed correctly. In their letter, they enclosed a printed copy of the photo. In the image, just barely visible in the reflection of the glass case, there appears to be a second face. Not the boys. Not anyone. Who was standing in the museum that day? A woman's face, pale and indistinct, hovering just behind Robert. The family begged Robert to forgive them. They begged him to stop. The museum keeps these letters in a filing cabinet. There are hundreds of them. And they keep coming. But here's what the museum doesn't tell visitors: Robert isn't the only cursed object in that building. In the storage room, there's a companion doll. Robert's bride, some call her. She's never been displayed. The museum director refuses to discuss her. But according to one former employee who spoke on condition of anonymity, that doll is far worse than Robert. Robert plays tricks, the employee said. He causes mischief. But the bride? She wants blood. In 2008, a woman named Patricia Edmonds from Salem, Massachusetts, had collected over 200 dolls. Antique dolls, handmade dolls, dolls from every era and continent. Her home was a museum of glassy eyes and porcelain smiles. Friends stopped visiting. Family members felt uncomfortable among so many frozen faces, so many unblinking stares. Patricia didn't care. She loved every single one. Until she brought the 201st doll home. She'd found it at an estate sale in Vermont, tucked in the back of a closet, wrapped in stained newspaper from 1952. The doll was unusual. Its face seemed to shift depending on the angle, the lighting. Sometimes it looked peaceful. Sometimes it looked like it was screaming. Patricia added it to her collection, placing it on a high shelf in her living room. That night, she woke to the sound of breaking glass. Rushing downstairs, she found her living room transformed into a nightmare. Every single doll had been pulled from its shelf, its case, its chair. 200 dolls arranged in a perfect circle around the room. All of them facing inward. All of them facing the center of the circle where the new doll now sat. Patricia hadn't put it there. The doll was still on the high shelf, she was certain. She was certain. But here it was, surrounded by her entire collection, like subjects bowing before a queen. She called the police. They found no signs of a break-in. No footprints. No explanation. The officer who responded suggested it might have been an earthquake, though there had been no seismic activity reported. Patricia knew better. Over the following weeks, her dolls began to break. One by one. Cracks appearing in porcelain faces. Glass eyes falling out. Limbs detaching for no reason. Every damaged doll had been facing that new doll, the one from Vermont. Patricia finally decided to get rid of it. She drove to the town dump herself, threw it in the compactor, and watched it crushed. She went home relieved. The doll was sitting on her front porch when she arrived. Not a scratch on it. Patricia Edmonds sold her house 3 days later and moved across the country. She left everything behind. All 201 dolls. The new owners lasted 6 months before they too abandoned the property. The house stands empty now on Hawthorne Boulevard. Sometimes, neighbors report seeing lights moving from window to window late at night. And if you look closely through the front windows, you can still see them. Dolls. Hundreds of dolls. Standing in formation. All facing the same direction. All looking toward the street. Waiting for someone new to bring them home. The most dangerous cursed dolls aren't singular entities. They're pairs. Bonded. The Whitmore twins of 1923 were identical girls, Clara and Catherine, who died together in a typhoid outbreak in Charleston, South Carolina. Their grief-stricken mother commissioned 2 identical porcelain dolls, exact replicas of her daughters at age 7. She kept them in the girls' bedroom, dressed in their clothes, positioned in their chairs. She would talk to them. Set places for them at dinner. The neighbors whispered that grief had broken her mind. They were wrong. Grief had opened something. The dolls, it said, contained fragments of the twin souls. But souls torn apart by sudden death, confused and angry. The mother died. In 1925 under mysterious circumstances. She was found in the twins' bedroom, arms wrapped around both dolls, eyes wide open in terror. Cause of death, unexplained heart failure. The dolls were separated after that. One was sold to a family in Georgia. The other to a collector in Virginia. And that's when the deaths began. Anyone who owned one of the twin dolls reported the same phenomena. The doll would cry. Real tears would stain its porcelain cheeks. It would whisper a name. The name of its sister. Clara calling for Catherine. Catherine calling for Clara. The owners would hear scratching sounds inside the walls. They would find messages written in dust. Where is she? Find her. We need to be together. 7 people owned these dolls across 8 decades. All 7 died violently. Car crashes. Falls. One drowning in a bathtub with only 3 inches of water. In 2004, an occult researcher named Dr. Harold Vance tracked down both dolls. He believed reuniting them would end the curse, would finally give the twins peace. He was found dead in his study on the night he brought them together. The dolls were positioned on either side of his body, facing each other, their small hands almost touching. His face was frozen in an expression of absolute horror. The dolls disappeared after that. Police evidence logs show them checked into storage. But when investigators went to retrieve them for trial evidence, the box was empty. Some believe they were stolen. Others think they escaped. Because that's the thing about the twin dolls. They've learned. They've adapted. And now that they're together again, now that they're reunited after all these years of rage and longing, they're not interested in peace. They're interested in revenge. Against the living. Against anyone who might try to separate them again. If you see two identical dolls, porcelain faces, dressed in white lace dresses from the 1920s, don't touch them. Don't photograph them. And whatever you do, don't try to take them home. Because the twins are still out there. Still looking. Still waiting. And they always find new owners. These 7 cursed dolls represent only a fraction of the possessed objects moving through our world, passing from hand to hand, waiting in antique shops and estate sales and dusty attics. Each one carries its own darkness. Its own hunger. But there's one more doll we haven't discussed. One that doesn't appear in any museum or collection. One that's never been photographed or documented. The locals in a small town in northern Maine call it the Finder. Because it doesn't wait to be discovered. It finds you. It chooses you. And once it has, there's no refusing its gift. In our next story, we'll explore what happens when a doll decides you're worthy of its attention. When it appears on your doorstep, uninvited. When it will not be ignored. Sleep well tonight. And if you wake to find something watching you from the corner of your room, something you don't remember being there before, remember this: don't make eye contact. It takes that as an invitation.